Hi everyone, I'm Jocelyn Kochi and I'd like to share with you today a first pedalling study called Waterfall. Waterfall comes from the Magical Mystical collection, which is a collection of 12 studies in tonal expression which range from pre-preliminary through to third grade in the Australian and New Zealand grading system, which is a little earlier than first grade through to about fourth grade in the ABRSM system, which is widely used through Asia and the UK. And late elementary to mid-intermediate in the US. So the reason that Waterfall makes such an ideal first pedalling study is partly because it has a lot of patterns throughout, a lot of triadic patterns, which makes it fairly simple to learn, but mostly because it has a slow rate of harmonic change. I'll go through Waterfall, I'll play through it, and then I'll go back and go over the teaching process. Okay, so that's Waterfall. The way that I would start teaching this piece is to play through the left hand, or have the student play through the left hand, which are all the long notes with the stems down, while I play through the right hand. So the student will play these notes, and I'll play this. Student. And then as the student goes through, you can guide them to see the patterns. So they're going to drop a third and skip a finger. Then that repeats. Then they're going to come up a note, but instead of going to their second finger, they're going to go to their thumb. And then drop a third again. Come up one note again, moving to the thumb. Dropping a third again. And coming up one note again, but this time moving to the second finger rather than the thumb. Now they're coming up a third again here, but they're going to be going to the sharp this time. So they have to move into the black keys. Then back to A for the second page. Up one note, going to the thumb, dropping a third. This is a repeat of the first page. Coming up one note, going to the thumb, dropping a third again. Coming up one note, but this time to the second finger. Now instead of going to the G sharp this time, they are moving up to the A. And now they're going to be changing clef, so they'll be guided to read this in the treble. So the way I like to explain that changeover is to say that this is the way you would read this as though you were playing the right hand, but you're going to play it with the left hand. And then they've got the same note again with an 8th VA above it, and then a repeat. So once you've gone through that a couple of times and the student's quite comfortable with the patterns, then the next thing I would do is to be playing the left hand myself and then have my student play just the first note of the right hand. So if I'm playing this, my student is playing this with the thumb. And all the right hand notes are barred together, so it's easy for them to see which notes are played with the right hand. And as they're playing through, I want to guide them to see how the notes in the right hand follow those in the left hand. So they're always following a third above. But I want the student to work this out for themselves. Now this time the student also is missing a note and going up by a third, but they're moving into the G sharp. So they're going to have to go right into the black keys. The left hand comes up and takes that G sharp, and the right hand moves back out to the white keys here. It's still a third above. And the second page is a copy, pretty much, of the first page. So as the student is playing this, the right hand, they can see the patterns. Moving into that black key again, and this time the left hand comes up to the A, the right hand is still following a third above. As the left hand comes up to the treble, the right hand is still a skip above. A student can be reading that and learning to read those notes up high on the stave, and then the same thing but an 8VA written above it, and then a repeat, just playing the bottom note of the chord. So once you've gone over that a couple of times, the next thing I'd be doing would be having the student take all of the notes of the arpeggio in the right hand. So they're going to take them, the left hand is taking, which I'm still playing, left hand is taking the root of the chord, the student is going to take the third, the fifth, the octave, and then back down. The most important thing I think here for the student playing the right hand is for them to be very careful to be utilising this natural gap between the thumb and second finger. You don't want them to be playing this with a third finger in the middle, which children often do, and adults. They want to be making sure they're not stretching these fingers out, so they're using that natural gap here. So the fingering is 1, 2 and 5. So I'm playing the left hand, my student is playing the right hand. And they can see that the patterns are the same all the way through. They already know how to place that first note. So now they can follow the same pattern for each group as they go through. This is tricky. They need to come up into the black keys, but follow the same pattern. Now when the left hand comes up to the G sharp, the right hand is following the same pattern, but they're going to have to move in to the black keys for the fifth finger going up onto the G sharp. In addition, instead of playing their second finger on the D, they're going to play their third finger on the E. So avoid allowing your student to move their hands around and do some stretches and things. You want them to be playing that third finger exactly where it sits in their normal hand position that they've used for the rest of the piece. So they're playing their third finger the first time, and then the second time they're going back to the second finger. So they can do all of that without moving their hand out of position. Second page, there's a repeat. And because, well, probably not the first time around, but the second time that you play this, you can guide them to use a little bit of rotation. So this could be almost like a swaying sort of a thing. You want them to come off that last note on an upward sweep. So initially I would have them exaggerate that movement so that they know how it feels and the sort of movement they want to make. black keys again there, which is always a little tricky. And then here they're going to play only to the top of the arpeggio and then stop, and then up to the next one, playing to the top, not coming back down again, the octave higher, and then they can separate all of those chords in the last chord, all of those notes in the last chord. When they've done that through a couple of times, they're ready to put that all together. So the main things to be concerned about with putting that all together are going to be with the left hand has to be concentrated on with the fingering, because the fingering does change. You've got that patterning where the drops to the third finger and then comes up to the thumb. So it's not where the finger would normally come. It's going to require a little bit of thought. The right hand pretty much can follow on autopilot until it gets to the end of that first page with the changes of notes, which is a little bit tricky. And the only other part which is going to be difficult is going to be in the last line. So here we've got a timing change from 3/4 to 2/4. So we're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 1, 2. So the impulse for the student is going to be for them to stop on that last note and hold it, because there's the natural impulse is to continue with the 3/4 rhythm. So what you will often get is this. Hold, hold, which we don't want. The other thing that happens if you ask them to move on to the next bar more quickly, or to move straight onto the next bar, is that they will speed that up, the 2/4 bar, without actually still moving straight on. They'll still pause at the end. So you'll get something like this. Which of course we don't want either. I find that words are really, really helpful for them to be able to move on from one bar to the other. So I use something like waterfall is flowing, waterfall is flowing, water falling, water falling, water falling. So that you can keep that rhythm going. You've got waterfall is flowing, water falling, water falling, water falling down. And that can happen slowly, but without any sort of pause in between the bars. Okay, so once you've gone through that a couple of times, I think that you can send them home with that. And I wouldn't put the pedal in the first week. I would send the student home with this to practice for a week to get really, really comfortable with the patterns. And then the following week they can come back and you can start to put the pedal in. So when using the pedal for this, or when teaching the pedal for this, the advantage, of course, is that we have such a slow rate of harmonic change that the student doesn't have to put down the pedal after the lift quickly. It can go down quite slowly. The impulse always for students is to put their toe down with the beat, which of course we don't want. We want them to take the toe up with the beat, but that goes against the natural impulse. So what I would start off by doing is just getting them used to lifting their toe on that beat. So I would start off with the pedal down. And lift as they play the note. Again, start with the pedal down. Lift. And once they get used to doing that a few times over, then I would allow them to move on just through those next 2 bars, putting their pedal down again sometime within those 2 bars, but it doesn't matter when. Start with the pedal down. Once they've got the hang of doing that, then you can move on to the next bar where the pedal needs to come up again on the first beat and work through it that way. from there you can go through the entire piece. The only problem or the only difference you're going to have to that is the end of the first page. There are 2 pedal changes instead of 1 every 2 bars. You've got a pedal change on each bar in the last 2 bars of the first page. I wouldn't worry about that initially. There is going to be 1 note different in the harmony, so it will eventually need to be changed. But for the time being, I would just get the student used to lifting that pedal at the beginning and taking it down slowly throughout, so that you will have this as they go through. So starting with the pedal down. And I often tell them when to lift, so that helps to remind them. Lift, lift, down, lift, and even if the pedal comes down before the harmony changes, it doesn't really matter. I would leave that for this week and just let them get used to it. When they're a bit more comfortable with the pedal change, I mean, you can talk them through. If the foot is not going down at all afterwards, you can perhaps remind them sort of part way through the second bar of each group. So you could have down first, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then when they become more proficient at this, then you can speed up the time that you want them to put the pedal down. So you could have up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And I would keep it fairly rhythmic. And you may be able to quicken up the change in that lesson, or you may, depending on the student, or you may need to leave it until the following week. And then I would still be talking them through a rhythmic change on the second beat. So starting with the pedal down, up, 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 down, and then it can stay down right through to the end. Okay, so that's Waterfall. I hope that you have found that useful, particularly if you are already using Waterfall or using the Magical Mystical Collection in your studio. And if you haven't used Magical Mystical yet, then I hope that you find this a useful addition to your teaching library. Waterfall and the Magical Mystical Collection are available from Wirrapang at www.australiancomposers.com.au.